Okay, well, it's a new week in our class, June 4th through 9th. Selecting a sample and measuring instruments is what we're talking about today. So you'll be reading about those in your textbook. This week I'm out in the Badlands, and so I may have a little more limited internet connection. We'll see what it's like out there. And so just be aware of that as we go along in the class. But there's a lot to do. I wanted to talk about some of the questions that you had asked that were good to share with everybody. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's see, what's the question here? Okay, so this week there's a learning module that you will do on evaluating information, and there's a problem with question number 4 in this module. It's supposed to link to a source and show you that source of information, but it doesn't apparently. And I've written them, the Credo group who creates these, I've written them and asked them to fix it, but I'm not sure if they'll have it fixed in time. So question 4, but one thing that I want you to be aware of is if you look in the gradebook, yes, these are these learning modules, activities that you do over the past, that you've been doing over the past few weeks, are in the gradebook in D2L, but if you notice, they don't actually add up correctly. So like you might complete an activity with 100%, but it only will give you maybe 0 in the gradebook in D2L in our class. But the truth is that doesn't matter because actually the grades from those that go into D2L don't count at all toward any kind of grade that you get in this class. So basically the learning module activities are just for your information to help you to learn about these important topics as you prepare the other assignments that you will be graded for in this class. So do go through them, but they are not part of the grade that you'll receive. So yes, there are problems with those reporting the grades to the gradebook in D2L, but the good news is they don't count toward any kind of final grade or any grade for you. They're just activities for your learning. So, and for some reason I can't delete them out of the gradebook either. I've tried to do that and it won't go away. So. Alright, another question was asked about using dissertations and theses, or theses, as a source of information. And yes, those are actually primary good sources of information to use. So as you're reading your 2 to 3 articles this week and in the future, you're going to keep doing that. Dissertations are fine and theses are fine. They are very long, though. They tend to be much longer than your regular research report article. And so that's something to keep in mind, but maybe you can read the executive summary of the abstract and kind of get an idea and just go to the sections that you need to for those. But yes, I would consider those primary sources of information, and remember for your literature review to be ready for that, you need to read mostly primary sources of information on that. Okay, what else? Okay, so questions about research topics. The past week was about that, narrowing your topic a little bit. And I wanted to point out that it's okay to research a topic with research studies that have already been done on it. You want to have enough reports to write about their results in your literature review, but not too many that there are no areas that you could propose a new study about. So, but that would be a really rare thing actually, to have too many studies about a certain topic that you can no longer do any more research in that topic. That's pretty rare, actually. So, yes, you want to find studies that have been done with a topic, but maybe there's something that you can point out. Maybe you can see that a lot of studies have been done, for instance, in my field, a lot of studies on educational technology have been done on the university level, or with human subjects who happen to be university students. Most of the studies in my field are that way. But not a lot, perhaps, are done in the K-12 level. And so that's a gap that you could point out as you're doing your literature review, maybe, if it had something to do with that. That would be an example of a gap, anyway. Okay, another one, your annotated bibliography. So it's been asking you to read a couple of articles, 2 to 3 articles each week to prepare for that literature review. And for each article that you do read, you want to make sure that you are covering or are writing notes about that article. What are the major findings, maybe? Who were the people that it was studied on? Who were the subjects? What was the instrument used, maybe, if that's relevant? Writing down some notes about relevant things along with the APA formatted citation for that article. And this is what's called an annotated bibliography. The annotated bibliography will then soon become a literature review. but it is not a literature review yet. You have to actually take it and do some more to it, which I'll talk about later. Now, the annotated bibliography that you write and the fact that you're reading 3 articles each week is not something that I have to review, because what you'll do is you'll make that into a preliminary literature review for me, and that will be due at the end of next week. So I get to review that. I don't have to review, though, your annotated bibliography or your notes on your articles necessarily. Remember, the subject or the study that you propose in this class will be a human subject study, so it can't be a study of, let's say, the elasticity of rubber bands, or that the subject is a rubber band, not a person. That, or something like that, that's not a subject, or the geology of a certain region, or the archaeological dig in a certain area. It's got to be human subjects. So as you move toward doing this, focus on human subject studies for your literature review. As you're reading these articles, try to get human subjects research reports that are of human subjects as well. That means that they basically collected data from humans. They had humans as their subjects and collected data from them in some area. Also, one final thing that was asked, and I think these again are good questions, so I wanted to share them with everybody, is that researchable problems. Make sure that you have problems that are researchable. So in the readings, you learned a little bit about how, if a research problem says, should parents keep kids up late at night? Well, that's not really a researchable problem, because it's more of a value judgment kind of question. So if you hear the question should, or use the word should in a question, you might be thinking about something that's probably not researchable. Instead you might want to say something like, does early bedtime for children lead to better academic outcomes, or something like that. But questions that are value judgments, like should guns be available to those who are mentally ill, that's not really a researchable problem again. It's more of a value judgment, or a judgment that I guess our politicians will have to figure out. Another one is the data collected. Yeah, so remember, data can be collected in some way from human subjects for your problems as well, or for your research proposals as well. So this is just some things you're moving toward, and I want to steer you in the right direction with some of these answers to these questions. So let's look at the activities for this week. First of all, you're going to be continuing to read 2 to 3 articles a week, but this time I want you to also take a closer look at the literature review section of some of the research articles that you're reading. Look at how the authors organize the literature review. A literature review goes from general to specific, and in the end it focuses on the current study in the article, or listed, maybe portrayed in the article is a better word for that. And pay attention to how the author doesn't just list one reference after another and tell what each article says. The author should instead combine the literature according to a logical pattern, such as previous studies, looking at those according to findings or results. That's the most common one, probably. Types of studies is another one, or focusing of studies, or another logical factor. So instead, and you'll see in literature reviews, you don't just list Smith did a study of this and found this. Johnson did a study of this and found this. No, you organize it. You say there have been several studies done about academic achievement and its corollary, or its correlation to staying up or going to bed early. And so then you talk about those studies. There have been other studies done about how going to bed early helps students' health or kids' health. And then you might talk about all the studies in that area. So you've got to organize it better than just an annotated bibliography where you just list study after study. You have to organize it in a logical way. All right, so here are some things to look for in a literature review. Is it comprehensive? Meaning, does it cover all the literature in that area? Is it organized so that the references that are least related to the problem or the study that's being reported in the current article are discussed first, and the most related references are discussed last? So again, it goes from general to specific. Let's see, the review is more than a series of abstracts or annotation. Instead, it analyzes and critiques the various studies. So again, it might talk about different studies, but it might also give some kind of a critique about those. Like this study only had a smaller population of people in it, or you might say, you might see somebody write, this study didn't use maybe the right instrument for this because the instrument, there's a better instrument out there to collect data from from younger children, that type of thing. It might critique them a little bit. The review compares and contrasts results of the various studies listed. So it might say something like, there are studies that have found that going to bed early helps academic achievement quite a bit, but other studies are mixed results. They might say that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So you're comparing and contrasting the different results of the various studies listed. The review includes mostly primary sources of information. So again, remember, primary sources are actual research reports, and one way to really tell that what you are viewing is a primary source is by looking and seeing if there's a methods section in there. And in that methods section, it would list the instruments used, the data collected, the people that the data was collected from, or the human subjects, and so forth. And then they report what the findings were of this research report. If it is not a primary source of information, it might not have these things, will not have these things. It might just talk about some opinions or list other studies that have been done that talk about it and combine those together. You are creating, with your preliminary literature review, or a literature review is a secondary source of information. It does not, it's not a primary source of information because it's not an original report or research report that you're giving. Let's see, the review only includes references that are relevant to the problem, includes an original summary and interpretation of the literature. So that one's important too. It's not just what other people say, but you are going to say what other people say as well. You're going to say, here are the studies, list those out, and then you're going to have some kind of a summary or interpretation at the end saying, hey, this is generally what the research says on this subject then. We've gone through the articles, we've talked about the different areas that have been studied, and in general, the findings support this idea that, for example, students should go to bed early each night because they do better in school, and there are some mental or happiness gains to be had if they do that. It's just an example. I don't know if that's true. And then the review of references are cited completely and accurately. So this week, as you read your articles, make sure you take a look at the literature reviews. Now, some of you might have articles that don't have a very good literature review or not a very full one, and that's too bad. Some articles are out there that don't. So you can just make note of that as well. So literature review examples. This will help you get ready for the assignment coming up too. You're going to read chapters 5 and 6 and review those slides there. So you're going to read about selecting a sample. And you'll want to think about these as you go forth. Think about your own research proposal that will come in the future. How will you select a sample? And you'll want to pick one of these methods. You'll come back to this chapter later and pick a method for selecting a sample. And then in chapter 6, selecting measuring instruments, you'll want to come back to this chapter too and use one of the methods that's listed there for selecting measuring instruments for your proposed research study. All right, and then you'll go through learning modules on evaluating and synthesizing information. And then reviewing the literature is the discussion for this week. So the library databases are typically the easiest and reliable to use for conducting research. And you might be able to share some of those that you have found helpful so far in finding good quality research reports. You may also want to share professional organizations that contribute to research in your area of interest. And then talk to each other about those. So that's something to discuss on the board. And again, because I'm in the Badlands this week, it might be hard for me to respond as much as I have in the past. So you might have to respond to one another a little bit more during this week, but it should work out well. I do want to mention that scholar.google.com is a good database as well for finding sources. One thing I don't like about it, though, is that you get so many sources on a topic anytime that you search for it. But what I do like about it is you get the most relevant usually first, and it uses natural language, unlike the library databases. So natural language meaning that you can type in an actual sentence that makes sense to you, and it might find what you want. Versus the library databases, you have to kind of do the and or and try to get some weird words that may not be so natural. So that's another one you could look at or talk about in the discussion. And then finally, during this week sometime, you'll want to take exam 1. It is due at the end of this week, June 9th at 11:59 p.m. And just to give you a little bit more about that, you can, let's see, it's going to have 30 questions in it. There are 30 points from this, and the 3 exams are worth 25% of your grade for this class. So there'll be 3 of those. You get 2 attempts to complete the exam. If you choose to take advantage of that option, you can just take it once if you want to. Your grade will be based on the highest attempt score. And you can look at course materials to take this exam. So again, you can have your textbook out or other materials if you want to, but you only get 2 hours to finish it, so you do need to kind of have, like I warned you, have some highlights or notes of the chapters. And it is focused on chapters 1 through 6. It's not really on the, let's say, learning modules or other items in the course. So you can look at course materials if you make sure that you do start the exam before the very end of the week so that you have time to finish it before that time, because I believe it does cut off like at 11:59 when that hits on June 9th. I think you can no longer finish the exam if I'm not mistaken. So make sure you schedule a little time this week to take that exam along with all the other things. It's a busy week in our class. So that is the week in a nutshell, in a not so small nutshell. Hope you have a great one.